All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Red Room. Tonight, I'm going to do a little introduction to a new workshop that I've finally synthesized and have been wanting to do for quite some time on mental agility, doing gymnastics in your mind, knowing all the places in your mind you can go, your strengths, your flexibility, and being able to be agile with that, like as if you're a gymnast instead of with your body, a gymnast with your mind, so that you know all the musculature, all the balances, all the ways they work together. And I believe that when you have mental agility, you're able to create the life that you want. You're not limited by anything internally. And you know what they say. Usually, I'm my own worst enemy. I've come to the conclusion that that's very true, at least living in these times in North America and in many other countries as well. But especially these times when we're mostly limited by our internal abilities, whether or not they're capable or incapable. So, mental agility, we know many things about what it is to be mentally intelligent, mentally capable. And it's a fascinating study, actually. I love it. It's quite deep, quite broad. And yet, I want to bring it down to a few things that we can talk about quickly and get you to a place now of having some kind of a shift where if there's an obstacle that you have internally or in your mental agility that holds you back, let's see if we can give you that flexibility or that strength and move past holding yourself back. So there's a handout that you can download if you like, and it looks like this. And it's a quick picture, a quick way of looking at the 5 different false fears that we have. I think of them as universal fears, and if they hold us back, usually they're false fears. Now, realistic fears, of course, those are very desirable. They keep us on track, they keep us safe, they keep us being discerning, and they keep us being true to ourselves in the finest way. But false fears are the ones that get in our way, the ones that are unrealistic. And frankly, one of the things that I say is, I really don't respect your false fear because it's false, it's not true, and it gets in your way. It holds you back from being all that you can do and expressing yourself in all the ways that you naturally carry. Now, if you have any thoughts about this or any questions, I love it when you type them to me. It makes this experience creative, dynamic, and very present. All right, so your false fears that inhibit your mental agility. Now, I try to be a little creative with these, and if we look at the model that you can print out if you please, I start from the bottom up because the bottom is the most primitive going up to the most advanced. And this model coincides with the concepts and theories around psychology, the basic ones that most of us in psychology or in human relationships or abilities use as a benchmark. And one of these is, of course, developmental psychology. Another is if you take any classic effective parenting course, you're going to learn the first goals of misbehavior when your children are misbehaving and you're trying to figure out what to do. The goals of misbehavior usually come from a child that has not received what they expected to receive healthily and happily. So the first one down at the bottom, this is the part of us that gets in the way that's called the survivor. And the survivor needs safety and a sense of confidence in being able to survive, be okay, be fed, be safe in the world. And this comes from the very first instinctual needs and desires that any baby and any human being has. And the fear, the universal fear is, I'm afraid that I'm unsafe. Now, there are times when we're definitely not safe. And then there are times when we're afraid that we're not safe, but there's really no danger anywhere in sight. And sometimes if that gets way out to the edge of something that's very unhealthy, then we call that paranoia, where we're afraid of something in an unrealistic fashion. So I'm afraid I'm unsafe. And this is people who I call sometimes worrywarts, where they're thinking about, well, I'm setting off on this trip. I have one spare tire, but maybe I should have two spare tires because we're going to be driving a long way and we have a couple of 100 miles in between gas stations. Now, once I was on a trip, one of my favorite trips of all time was across the desert in the plains, the Nazca Plains in Peru. Well, in that case, there were no buses. We had two vans, and the roads were all gravel and rock, going across this large desert for over a day. And there was nothing, and they did carry more than one spare tire because during the process, our van and the other van each blew a tire. So in that case, that's a realistic fear. We've got to have extra spare tires. But if you're just driving from Dallas-Fort Worth to Little Rock, Arkansas, you're probably not going to need to carry 2 or 3 extra spare tires. And so then that would be an irrational fear. And I would say, well, that's a little waste of your time, intelligence, and energy. So the survivor, yes. If you're living in a country where the infrastructure isn't like ours, then your survivor is going to need to pop up sometimes. But a lot of the time, I'm afraid that I'm unsafe is irrelevant. Now, if you are in a neighborhood where there's danger, yeah, that's a healthy fear. And that then causes a degree of stress when you're afraid needlessly. So then the next universal fear that we have is, I'm afraid that I'm inadequate. Well, in some ways, we are all adequate or inadequate. And yet when you have that sense of inadequacy that then amounts to low self-esteem or low self-confidence, pretty much that gets in your way. Unless you're one of those people, or you know one of those people who is overly confident and thinks they're pretty much the cat's pajamas. So that then is the other end. That's like the continuum, both ends of, I'm afraid that I'm inadequate, or I'm afraid that you're not adequate to me. So this person needs self-esteem and a sense of significance. And when we get to that place and think we're inadequate, we end up playing the role of the victim, consciously or unconsciously, and hold ourselves back from freely and generously doing the things that we love to do, that we're good at, because we're tearing ourselves down with a false fear that we are inadequate. If we have that victim sense of poor me, low self-esteem, not feeling confident, not feeling worthy, not feeling deserving, then all the talents that we already have, we're probably not going to be expressing them freely and fully and giving them to the world. So then I believe it's a false fear. Then the third level of fear and stressing is the orphan. And this has to do with emotional intelligence and the wisdom of the heart. This person has a fear that stresses them, that says, I'm afraid that I'm unlovable. And so often, being afraid that you're unlovable comes from a place in very early childhood where something disturbed that bond, that relationship with the mother, where the nurturing that a baby expects wasn't enough for them to feel like, here's me. I'm a good entity. I'm a lovable person because look at my mommy, the way she looks at me and the way she laughs at me and the way she mirrors me. Then I naturally know that I'm loved. Ask me a question anytime you like or chime in. The fourth way that we have fear and that we stress ourselves is the saboteur, where we sabotage ourselves. And this fear is, I'm afraid that I'll lose control. And sometimes I'm afraid that I'll lose control is one pattern or another pattern. One pattern of losing control is passive. Another pattern of losing control is aggressive. And so I'm afraid that I'll lose control, so I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to keep control by checking out and not being accessible to other people. If I'm passive, then in certain ways I keep control because I'm not going to be available to be controlled by others because that's what I'm afraid of. Or on the other hand, I'm afraid of losing control, which means I'm going to be aggressive. I'm going to hold on to things, the environment, people, and hang on tightly and try to make everything happen the way I want it to happen because I'm afraid to let go and lose control. And so this is the way that we sabotage ourselves. We need self-control, but not the control of the environment, so to speak. Of course, it's not 100%, is it? But that fear, that universal fear of losing control, can get us to the place where we're not controlling and using ourselves with mental agility. We're trying to control things perhaps that we can't control or things that are inappropriate for us to control. Does that make sense, you guys? Give me some feedback or ask me a question. Okay, and then the fifth fear and style of stressing ourselves is, I'm afraid that I'll be betrayed. And this is the betrayer in us, and we learn this by being betrayed as a child, where we want to have wisdom and honor rather than to betray ourselves or to be betrayed by others. And it's interesting how the betrayer works because, again, there are two different styles of self-betrayal. The one side is what I call the cheater, the person who betrays their own integrity by not being honest, by lying or cheating or doing things that are against integrity. And then there's the other side where the people are kind of judgmental and righteous, and instead of being a cheater, a saint, where they judge other people and betray their own sense of honor by putting themselves above others and saying, I'm better than you, and I'm a little holier than thou or saintly. So that's another way of betraying our natural wisdom, honor, and integrity. One way is to actually be dishonest and to be a cheater. And then the other way is that holier than thou, self-righteous, saintly attitude. So here's a comment. Even if I have a silly fear, I can't stop it usually. Is there a good way to stop it? Perfect question for this evening. Thank you so much. Of course there is. I wouldn't be talking about this if there wasn't a way out. And yes, how to stop that fear, and this is the bottom line really, it's a 4-step process, and it's a classically taught process, and it's very easy to understand, and it's not always easy to do. You know, there aren't any quick fixes, right? Well, that means that you can understand it quickly, and it will take you practice, because mental agility is just like you were a gymnast that knows how to do some of those flips on the bar, you know. That takes quite a bit of practice. It takes strength. It takes flexibility. Same thing with our minds. We need to practice certain thoughts so that we can stay true and strong to that thought, and that when we need to change it, we can agilely and resiliently, with agility, change that thought, or take that thought and bring it back to where we want it to be. Because here's the little equation, and this is simple, and yet it's one of the universal truths about how we human beings work. So I'm going to type this for you so you can write it down for yourself if you want. So that's 3 parts. Number 1, my thoughts determine my feelings. That means you are not your feelings. We aren't what we feel. Our emotions are more primitive. And if you're familiar with that, and you probably are, our emotional system, our feeling system, is also in mammals. It's called the midbrain, that's in the middle of your brain, and the mammalian brain, which means mammals have this brain, which is why they respond emotionally. So it's a more primitive it's a more primitive brain than the human brain. Thus, it responds to thoughts. The feelings don't come first. The thoughts and perceptions come first. And the thoughts are what create the feelings. The fears, right? So, number 1, my thoughts determine my feelings. Number 2, guess what? I can choose my thoughts. Good news and bad news, right? I can choose my thoughts, and oops, I'm the one responsible for choosing my thoughts. And then, number 3, therefore, I can choose or determine my feelings, how I feel. There you go, dear. So, you're saying, if I have a silly fear, and goodness knows all of us have those, I can't stop it usually. Is there a good way to stop it? This is your formula. Notice what you're thinking, and notice that your thinking can spiral into things that are no longer rational, reasonable, or have anything to do with the truth. That you start, and this is often a function of how mentally creative we are and how smart we are, that instantly, if you have a thought, you can build that thought classically from a molehill into a mountain, right? So your silly little fear can become a huge mountain of terror in almost seconds, because our emotions are not who we are. They're just a response to whatever we think. We can change a thought in a heartbeat. Our feelings change in a heartbeat. And you move from just a little worry to, oh no, I'm going to die inside, right? So the key is deciding what you're going to think. So there it is. I can choose my thoughts. Just because you know that that's what you need to do doesn't mean that instantaneously you can change your thinking and be done with it. Sometimes it's pretty hard. So if you're needing to learn the skill, and this is part of learning mental agility, you want to have whatever it is that you need to develop that skill. Just like in my metaphor of the gymnast, does a gymnast learn how to be a gymnast all by themselves? No. They usually have, in the beginning when they're little kids, they have classes, they have appropriate attire, they have classrooms, they have safety, they have mats, they have all the tools that they need in order to practice their gymnastics. And they're fostered in the group class. Then later on, they probably have a personal trainer. etc. etc. There are competitions where they learn by gearing themselves up to compete. And they have inspiration from their friends, the other gymnasts, movies or videos or games that they play and watch, books, all kinds of things that they have to help them become better as a gymnast. We want you to treat yourself the same way with your fears that stress you out. Equip yourself with the things that are going to help you keep mentally focused in a positive way and not take that little fear and build it from a molehill into a mountain. Does that make sense? Each one of us has a different system of thoughts that are second nature to us, that we respond to, that are our favorites, and that we like. Sometimes those system of thoughts take us down a road that I call the asphalt, because it's the old way and it makes us feel any one of those 5 universal fears. Makes us feel unsafe, makes us feel inadequate, makes us feel like we're unlovable, we're going to be out of control and something bad will happen, or we will betray ourselves or somebody will betray us. I call those, if they're false fears, and they usually are, that's going right down the asphalt of the map in your brain that is there because you didn't put it there. It was your experience through life. Probably started when you were young, when you were little. And that means now deciding that that's not the train of thought or the road you're going to go down with your thinking process. So, how do we help you be strong in choosing to shift your thoughts to something that's where you feel like you're lovable, where you're confident, where you're really in touch with your honor, integrity, and strong with it, where you're safe, where you feel worthy. So that can be dozens of things. And the best thing for you to do immediately is to start making lists of the things that you need, of the things that you respond to. And there are some things that happen and work just like that. So the best thing is humor. The best thing is a smile. The best thing is laughter. Immediately all those fears go away. And that means if you know somebody that makes you laugh, if you're on the job and there's somebody in your department that just all you have to do is think about him or her and you get a smile on your face. Go spend time, just take a break, go spend time with that person and feel the natural lift of somebody of good humor. Watch a silly movie that you know makes, I know some things, some comedies I really don't, they don't make me laugh. I think, well, that's kind of funny. But I want one that makes me laugh out loud. So I know those. I need to have those readily accessible to me when I need to lift myself up out of one of those slumps, mental slumps. Sometimes, and this one is pretty accessible to most of us, it's music. Music grabs your mind and your feelings and your body and lifts it all up, depending on what kind of music you need that you respond to, because you'll respond almost instantly to that. Tell me what you think. Can you relate to this? Do you think this might work for you with that silly fear that you have? Or is it a silly fear that you'd like me to give you some suggestions with? So just let me know. So are you recommending escape? In a way, yeah. Now, escape if it's running away and just avoiding and denying it and refusing to be intelligent with it, that's not an escape that's going to work. It's just avoidance rather than taking care of yourself. So a mental escape, yes. And I think of it more as a mental distraction, where you distract that part of your mind that's involved with anxiety and fear, and you move your mind over here and you escape, yes, you escape that small-minded place and go to a much better place. Does that make sense? And we all have the choice to do that internally. Pretty much we can decide where we're going to focus our mind, what we're going to think about. And one of the tools that is very powerful and quite accessible nowadays is guided imagery, or meditation CDs, or MP3 downloads. And I am going to type my very favorite place to find those. It's this wonderful woman called Belleruth Naparstek, and she is the person, she's associated with hospitals and doctors to help people heal, but she's also got dozens of guided imageries with her voice and music that move your mind in a beautiful direction. And it's called Health Journeys. So, Belleruth Naparstek, her Health Journeys, you can find them online. You can buy it for what you can pay for a CD, like $10 to $15, and download it on your computer right there. She also gives you, if you sign up, a free 15-minute kind of meditation or mentally soothing recording. So it's quite accessible, and I think just about everybody responds to that. It's the best that I know. She's a colleague that has my utmost admiration. Great tools. So, any tips for noticing subtle anxiety? It's difficult when you're used to living with it. Oh, that's an excellent question, and you're absolutely right. That means that if you have subtle anxiety and it's kind of always there, that it's probably important that you notice the kind of flavor of your typical thought process. Is your typical thought process kind of thinking, ooh, have I got enough? Did I prepare enough? Is it going to be okay? What if this happens? Have you got those kinds of thoughts going on in the background? Then it depends on what it is that kind of soothes you and calms you down inside, having to do with those kind of subtle worries or concerns, where you tell yourself, oh, I don't need to worry about that. It's fine. Nothing's going to fall out of bed. Or if you really do need to change something so that there's not that kind of twinge inside of you that's worrying, gee whiz, I know the brakes of my car need to be fixed, and am I safe? Well, fix the brakes of your car, you know? We don't want you to just change your thoughts and ignore it and then have a problem. So notice if if that kind of subtle anxiety has to do with something that you haven't checked off the list or taken care of. Do you have a sense of what style of universal fear or false fear it comes from? Sometimes it's a deep existential thing, and in that case, I would want to have you think about spiritual intelligence, or a sense of being safe on the planet, safe in the universe, safe in the world. And if you have a spiritual belief where you can, in essence, relax because you know the presence of God or a divine intelligence is there, and you're resting in that. Sometimes that's very comforting, and if you haven't built that sense of existential security in yourself or in the world, you can foster that, and it makes a big difference in you. Am I going down the right track for you? Let me know. Subtle anxiety sometimes is just a plain old bad habit that you got from maybe your mom never stopped worrying, and you're kind of always, mm, mm, mm. And one of the things that I find with people who have asthma, oftentimes one of their parents was kind of an anxiety type, kind of worrying, always kind of tense and vibrating. And the child gets that impression and has a sense of anxiety, but as an adult, they don't even know where it came from. Okay, I notice it the most around interacting with others, questioning my behavior. Ooh, there's the big clue. Questioning my behavior. So that's a doubt about yourself, a doubt about whether or not you're acceptable or your behavior is appropriate or good enough, or whether people are going to interact with you. So that may be shyness. It may be you haven't developed your social intelligence. It may be that you don't know quite how to communicate very well yet. That field, and then that can be assisted by many things, by developing self-esteem. And if you've seen Nathaniel Branden's work, he's got books and materials that help you connect with your natural sense of self-esteem. Because if you're looking at me on your computer and you're typing, there's no reason for you to have low self-esteem. And to know that you're worthy, and I like to think that you're not any better than anybody else, and you're not any less than anybody else. We're all equally valuable. Now, some people do bad things, and we certainly don't want to accept those or tolerate those. And yet, we all need to be, in my philosophy, equally respected. And that means that for you to have an equal respect for yourself as you do for other people. Now, I realize saying that doesn't mean that instantaneously you've got the feeling and the thought. But the beginning is to change your thought process about it. And sometimes that just means that you have plans, skills, methods on how to interact with people so that you know it's going to work. You practice it over and over again, and then you're confident in it. So about interacting with others, questioning my behavior. So if you're really one of those people who has bad habits and is not a social person and you're kind of weird, some people are like that, that means getting some coaching from a mentor in proper etiquette, proper posture, how you go freely in a social situation or a networking situation or an office situation. But if you're pretty good, you don't need etiquette training, then a lot of that probably is maybe being shy and not having a plan or not understanding communication options in terms of interacting with other people. And that's readily available to you. For example, remember when you're in a social situation, most of us honestly respond to somebody that's interested in us, who is really and truly a good listener. And that means, I know this is what I do with children. Oftentimes I'll meet children, I don't know them, their parents are around, but how do you have a conversation with a child? And so I always have the freedom to ask, what's your favorite subject in school? Who's your favorite teacher? And that usually launches us onto a cool conversation. And incidentally, one of the things that I've discovered in doing that is it's kind of sad. But this year my favorite subject is math. Who's your favorite teacher? My math teacher. Well, last year, what was your favorite subject? Oh, it was gym. How come? Well, and who was your favorite teacher? Well, my gym teacher. And so often with little kids, whatever it is that they love is dependent on the best teacher that they have. Just a little side note there. So asking somebody a question about what why are they here? What is it? Do they know somebody? What is their work? What is their favorite hobby? Whatever it is, where they come from. If you're uncomfortable in social situations like that, you're not sure about your behavior, then get yourself some tools. Get some plans together, think it through. Online, you can find all kinds of resources now that we didn't have access to. And teach yourself, mentor yourself. If that isn't enough, find somebody, and there are people who will mentor you socially and help you find that place where you really are comfortable and you really enjoy yourself socially, unless you're truly an introvert, and then it does take energy, but you can still enjoy yourself socially. You don't have to be an extrovert to enjoy social interactions. It just takes a little energy, that's all. Does that help about questioning your behavior and that kind of stressful fear that you have? Let me see here. One of the things that I wanted to share with you is how I've figured out that this starts, because we definitely want to make sure that our children end up healthier, more balanced, with less stressful fears than we do. Okay, that helped. Good. I'm glad. Anyone else, if you have a question or a concern, or you're looking at one of those stressful fears that you carry, I'd be so interested to know about it and to share whatever information that I have right now. Let's see. I'm trying to get over my childhood religious guiltiness. Oh, still. Isn't that ironic that our parents give us religious experiences to benefit us, and then there's something in there that somehow wounds us, and guiltiness is, irrational guilt at least, is a very sad thing for me. The world around you doesn't see it, and it's something that holds you down and holds you back and makes you feel bad and makes you do things that really aren't your best choice. I'll never forget a woman who came to see me, and I don't think she was able to get past it. She didn't come back to see me enough to really work through her irrational guilt. But her mother really should have been in a nursing home. This lady had a full-time job, and she would leave work at lunch to come home and see her mother. She would leave work home at the end of the day to take care of her mother, and didn't have a life outside of her job and caring for her mother full time, and being afraid during the day of what her mother might do. And her mother probably had some dementia and needed care. But the daughter, she knew, she'd talked to people and they'd recommended that to her, that it was time for her mom to have full-time care, and it would have to be in a nursing home. And her guilt about caring for her mother was so deep and so heavy that it tortured her, that she just could not allow that change to occur. And so as a result, and you and I know, her mom none of us would ever intentionally force our children into that kind of guilt, to where our life was being harmed or taken advantage of. And yet she couldn't get past the guilt. So how do we get past that kind of guilt that holds us back? First of all, if I were you, I would want to get it all down on paper. If you're a writer, if you're a journaler, I would want you to, so to speak, individuate from it. So rather than holding it here, holding the concepts that make you feel guilty here in yourself, I would want you to individuate. And the easy way to do that anybody can do, is to write it down on paper and put it down there outside of you. That's the first intelligent way to tackle it. Now, do you remember the little equation that I typed earlier up here where it says, my thoughts determine my feelings. I can choose my thoughts. Therefore, I can choose or determine my feelings, how I feel. So your first thing is to write down your thinking around whatever that religious guiltiness is. And the best way is be very specific, writing it all down. Get very clear with all the thoughts and all the feelings around that, all the philosophies around that. It's usual that when we have a false fear, those universal fears are based on old false beliefs or false assumptions. And your example of religious guiltiness is just exactly that, that you were taught false beliefs or false assumptions. And as a child, if largely you're obedient to and loving and connected with your parents, you really believe what they tell you and you invest in the beliefs that they share with you. And a lot of those are wonderful. And a lot of those you cherish for the rest of your life, and you teach them to your own children, your own grandchildren. And yet some of them from the previous generation, and especially now, the previous generation didn't think, unless they were very broadly educated, and test beliefs and see the false assumptions around life, relationships, emotional intelligence. So first, get very intelligent with it, because where you're going to change it is with your thoughts. And the way that I do that with people is we list all of your false assumptions, your false beliefs, and all of the feelings underlying all of those. And then what we do is we question them and look at whether or not they're logically, reasonably, and in the most respectful way, are they true? And if they're not, then, I like to draw them on a flip chart or a whiteboard, and then I test each one of them and show people that they're lies. They really are lies. They're not true. They're false. And just cross them off. And then, of course, the next thing is to decide, instead of this, then this, which means creating for yourself, but now with your adult mind, with your artful mind, with your happy mind, with the things that you really do treasure and respect, a new system of beliefs. So that means taking the old one that makes you feel so bad or badly and writing a new one that you know is the way of health, respect, love, and happiness. Does that appeal to you? Does that make sense? Or is that a method that may not work for you? Because there are other ways. It just depends on your personality, how it is that you feel guilty. There's all kinds of guilts that come with certain religious traditions. Sometimes it has to do with sexuality, your body. Sometimes it has to do with you're supposed to be married for life and not get a divorce. Sometimes it has to do with perhaps not being absolutely true to how your religion said you're supposed to worship. So can you give me a little bit of a clue? Which area of that is really the hardest one for you to let go of and move past? Let's see, I'll try that. What did you mean individual relate by writing? I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. It's individuate. Individuate. Separate yourself from your false beliefs. So, individuate means being individual. separate yourself. So individuate means I'm going to divide myself. Over here is I'm going to put it outside of myself. That's the best way of thinking of it. Putting it outside of yourself. So I'm going to separate myself from these beliefs by writing them, and I can see them out there. Just like I say on a flip chart or a whiteboard, the way I do that with false beliefs. And I do it typically in my marriage counseling when somebody is being tortured by beliefs about their relationship. They're, like, for example, a man or a woman is afraid their husband or wife is having an affair. The truth is, they've gotten all kinds of evidence that that person is faithful to death and would never do that, except their false fears get them thinking, what are they doing now? Can they be having an affair? Are they interested in somebody else? And if there was a little slip somewhere along the line, then they're really afraid. So what I do is I write them down out there. I individuate them. I take them out of you. I put them there, and then we can look at them. You don't have to hold them inside. And another thing that does is when you can take it outside of your mind and put it out over there, interestingly enough, and this is logical and reasonable, it somehow empties the creative space in your mind. So you don't have to hold on to all of those thoughts. Put them outside, and you become more intelligent and more creative with these ideas. Does that make sense about individuate from that pattern of thought? I want you to separate it from you because it's not who you are. If it's making you feel badly and it's false guilt, then this doesn't relate to who you are. It's a pattern of thought that I call it, that's part of the asphalt that you've got. It's an old pattern, it's an old habit, and you accepted it at some point, probably when you were young, not knowing that it was unacceptable. And so we want to remove it so that you are then free to create new thoughts, new beliefs, new assumptions based on what you now know as an intelligent and respectful adult. Does that help? Can you relate to that? And incidentally, thank you so much. I love this line of thought and being able to assist you in any way. It's delightful. I see, good, I'll try it. Yes, yes. And then come back to the Red Room and let me know, or email me. Let me know if it worked or if it helped. So we want to disrupt all those old guilty feelings. Nowadays we know better, and yet there are so many people that still hold on to them. I've got just a few minutes left. Doesn't time go by quickly in the Red Room? It does for me, because it's endlessly important hearing your questions and your concerns and making sense out of it so that we can take care of it and do something to resolve whatever it is that gets in the way, because we need you. We need your talent in the world. We need all of us to be at our best, happiest, healthiest for ourselves, for the quality of life we create, and for the future generations. Okay, is there anything... I know. I wanted to talk to you about the difference in the Saboteur. And this one is my favorite one. It's number 4. It's this one right here. The Saboteur, how we sabotage ourselves. Remember I talked in the beginning about probably the thing that gets in our way most is us and how we sabotage ourselves. Well, there are 2 ways of self-sabotage. And so I call it the indulgent and the judging. So the saboteur really has to do with personal power. And notice the little equation I gave you earlier was our thoughts determine our feelings. We can choose our thoughts and therefore choose how we feel about ourselves. Well, we can also choose our thoughts. And that is, I think, the pivot point of ultimate power. Choosing what you think, because choosing what you think then determines what you're going to plan and create in your life, both saying yes and saying no. So when we teach our children self-control, the best way is to give them a choice. And then they find the consequences or the rewards at the end of that choice. Now, the saboteur, there are two ways that we sabotage ourselves. One is that we are undisciplined, no limits, kind of passive, unmotivated, unstructured, indulgent, and I call that too loose. So our power is kind of loosey-goosey, wishy-washy. It doesn't really go anywhere or accomplish a whole lot, except for our own comfort and sedentary type pleasures. So that's one way of sabotage. The other way of self-sabotage is very tight, very stiff, very judgmental, and critical. That way of sabotaging ourselves, we are too strict, we're too harsh, we're too strongly disciplined and punishing if we don't meet these strict requirements in ourselves. And in a way, classical psychology would call that the internalized critical parent, where we have to do it, we must do it. And that's a kind of self-sabotage, because if you're that stiff, judgmental, and punishing, you're not free to be healthy. Yes, you want to be in self-mastery and make good choices, but punishment, we now know, really never has and doesn't work. Well, indulgence doesn't work either, although we need our indulgences sometimes, just as we need our consequences for making bad choices sometimes. But that's not strict punishment. Does that make sense? It's just the negative consequences that we get for not making good choices or being self-disciplined. So when we have self-control, so when we don't sabotage ourselves, I call us the champion, where we wield our power gracefully and for success, which means we have self-control, we make careful and intelligent choices. We have good judgment, we're orderly, we're timely, we're well-behaved, we're responsible, we're consistent, and we're accomplished. Now, my listener tonight, the one that said that he or she had nervousness with social situations, this kind of behavior where you feel timely, orderly, well-behaved, responsible, consistent, accomplished, then you're not sabotaging yourself in social situations. You're managing yourself with intelligence and with respect and kindness. So one of the things I love teaching about is the champion rather than self-sabotage, because we do sabotage ourselves with any kind of those old fears that stress us out. I hope this has been valuable for you this evening, thinking about the 5 ways that we are afraid and cause stress in our lives, which takes away from our ability to be healthy, happy, constructive, and contribute not only to the quality of our own lifestyle, but the quality that we give to the world. Thank you so much for tuning into the Red Room tonight. I love good company, good questions, and a good interaction. It's a delight for me. Thank you so much for showing up and sharing. Thank you, Heather. You're a delight. Oh, well, that's a delightful. That makes my day. Always love listening to you. Thank you for tuning in. It's lovely that I have people that get so much they come back. And tell your friends about the Red Room. It's free. It's available to everybody. It's a public and community service no matter where you are. And as you can tell, I'm not going away. I love doing it, and I love having you with me. So, good night from the Red Room. And I'll see you next week, same time, same place. Good night.